Hello dear friends of Roman history and welcome to this reaction video on Maiorianus. I said last time that we are going to do more reaction videos, and so here we are now, and I thought let's react to a video that I saw once a few years ago and which actually kind of was an inspiration for me or a motivator to start the channel Maiorianus. The video is by someone called Tominus Maximus, a channel which I highly respect, so please go and check out his channel and subscribe because he's doing really great work and I think his videos are really informative and also funny at the same time. Brother Tominus, really good stuff you're doing here. And so I was thinking, let's react to one of his videos which is really amazing, and it's the timeline of the Roman Empire every month, or let's say every year and later every month from 753 BC, the founding of the city of Rome, to 476 AD, the classical date of the fall of the Western Roman Empire. So over 1100 years of history compressed into 37 minutes of awesome video. Let's react. So my reaction will be genuine because the last time I saw the video was 3 years ago. So, you know, I forgot a lot about the details, but then again, this is Roman history, so I know many of the details anyways. So, you know, I will know what's going to happen, right? I know how it will end in 476 AD, so it's not exactly a surprise. However, some things, you know, might be interesting, like what I think about those events and like how I see them. So let's just, you know, let's get started and see how this will go. I myself don't really know how this is going to develop. So then, friends, let's start. Let's start with the video. 37 minutes long. Buckle up. Yeah, I'm buckled up. I'm buckled up. I'm buckled up. Okay. 753 BC, friends. That's where the whole story begins. That's where it begins, you know, with the founder, the legendary founder of Rome, King Romulus himself. And of course, in the beginning, I still remember it's faster, right? Because it wouldn't make sense to show every month now in the first few hundred years where not so much happened. You know, it's just a tiny speck you can see on the map. It's a very small area that Rome only controls, and it's going to stay like this for a long time. So if it would be every month, it would be a bit insanely long, the video. So that's very smart that he sped it up here, that it's like faster now. So yeah, we're going forward pretty fast. We're still in the kingdom. We're still like in the age of the Roman kings. You know, the 250 years were like the Roman kings. Until then, the last king was ousted from Rome and he fled. And then, of course, the Republic begins. Is it like Tarquinius Superbus, the last king of Rome? I think so. Yeah, now, exactly. Now the Republic begins. Bam! Now the age of the Republic has begun. 500 years, friends. 500 years of Republic. So, you know, we sometimes think about our countries, and it's kind of interesting that we say like, oh, this is an old country, like the USA, right? America, 250 years old. 250 years of Republic, the Romans would be laughing about this. The Romans would be laughing about this. They had 250 years of kingdom, and then 500 years of Republic, and then 1,500 years of empire, you know? Oh, now the expansion is slowly beginning. Now it's getting more interesting because Rome, you know, it was a constant war against the neighboring cities, you know, for a long time. It was Veii and the wars against the Samnites and you know, all these wars against the neighboring cities. Until then, in the 200s, you know, 3rd century, I would say now the Italian peninsula is conquered, and immediately the Punic Wars begin. It's quite interesting to see that as soon as the Romans had control over Italy, bam, the Punic Wars begin. Then the first Punic War is over. Rome has won. And now, of course, Hannibal, second Punic War. Look, Battle of the Trasimenic Sea, Battle of Cannae, and the whole south of Italy is being conquered by Hannibal. Crazy. Hannibal even had the chance to conquer Rome itself. Hannibal had the chance to conquer Rome, and now look, slowly dissolving. The Romans have a comeback. They raise one army after another. They lose an army. Bam, they raise another one. They lose an army. They raise another one. Those crazy bastards, you know? And Hannibal, that he was taken completely by surprise by how ferocious, how insane the Romans were. Like, he kicked them down and bam, they came back. Kicked them down, bam, they came back. Crazy. And now, of course, Battle of Zama, Scipio Africano, had defeated Hannibal. Scipio Africano, one of the greatest Roman generals of all time. His win-to-loss ratio is incredible. I think, I'm not sure, that I don't want to say anything wrong, but I think I'm not sure if he ever lost a battle. So maybe one, but his win-to-loss ratio is incredible, like almost no losses whatsoever. So he defeated Hannibal, and so the Second Punic War was over. But is Carthage safe from Rome? We know the story. Carthage wasn't safe from Rome because, you know, Cato always used to say after every speech in the Senate, and by the way, I think Carthage should be destroyed. You know, old Cato. So this is actually what's going to happen now. I think now we're in 182 BC, so not too much more to go. But now we have a period of relative stability, which is interesting to see that after each phase of expansion that the Romans had, in any age, in the Republic, you know, even the kingdom, the Republic, but the Empire, then a plateau followed where they had to rest, they had to regroup, they had to consolidate. You know, you must consolidate the territories that you have conquered. And so now we see this rare glimpse of like, oh wow, this looks peaceful now. This looks stable. Okay, of course, there's like fighting in Greece. There was all the time some fighting in Greece, but all in all, it's kind of stable in the West at least, right? But now, of course, we're nearing 150 BC, and that's when the Romans go really crazy. And I have to say that is also the time where I don't really like the Romans so much, because what they did to Carthage, seriously, that was over the top, okay? And to Athens, and especially to Corinth, like the raise of Corinth, man, Romans, that wasn't cool, okay? That was not cool. So the Romans in that period, they were. I don't like what they did to Carthage and to the Greeks. Seriously, that wasn't cool. Okay, that wasn't cool. Now, of course, Hispania is being soon conquered, but first, of course, Carthage. Now, 149, 148, bam, and Carthage. It begins. Carthage has been destroyed. Corinth has been razed to the ground. The whole of Greece has been conquered. Look, now it's happened. 146. That's the date where Carthage and Corinth razed to the ground. Crazy stuff. So now the Romans are the uncontested power after the Third Punic War. I would say already after the Second, but after the Third, absolutely uncontested in the Mediterranean. So now the conquest of Hispania. That is kind of interesting as well, because as we can see, it was also hard fought, and it took quite a while to conquer the whole of Hispania, as we saw, more than 100 years. Now, of course, immediately as soon as Hispania is under control, now, of course, Asia Minor. Immediately, the expansion into Asia Minor will begin, because the Romans, that's just what they did. They expanded. They liked to conquer new territories, right? So we shouldn't be too naive about the Romans. They sometimes, you know, as in the case of Carthage and Athens or Corinth, they were not always friendly. Okay, they weren't always super friendly, guys. Now, of course, I need a new microphone setup. Let's see what happens now. Now, of course, Illyria is being conquered slowly. Later, Illyria. Now, of course, okay, that's an interesting tribe. Who is that? The Cimbri. Yes, the Cimbri, of course. And that's when Gaius Marius will soon reform the legions, very soon. Now, of course, the expansion into Africa itself, because it's kind of funny. Here's Gaius Marius. Yes, now he's reforming the legions. And it's interesting because after the destruction of Carthage, the Romans did not immediately actually conquer Africa. It was actually left just like Carthage was left as a ruin. Okay, it was just like left as completely destroyed city. They didn't immediately build a new city, a new Roman Carthage. Actually, that happened quite a lot later in the 1st century BC. Which is kind of funny to think about, that you had the old Carthage completely destroyed and they just left it. That's how much they actually disdained Carthage. That's all. Now, of course, Sulla. Now, of course, the 1st century BC, right? The 1st century BC begins, which is the century of perpetual civil wars. That's what the Romans now we see do best. They always fight against each other. They were united for some time now, as long as the Roman state was still small, right? But as soon as the Roman state grew to a certain size, it became unstable. It became so big that suddenly you had rivaling generals who fought against each other. And that's when, Sulla rose to power. That's when Pompeius rose to power. Crassus rose to power. Caesar later rose to power. And that's basically when the instability would begin. However, culturally, literally, culturally, this was, of course, the zenith of the Roman Republic. This was like when the greatest works were written by Cicero, by Virgil, by Horace. These are the times when the Romans wrote the greatest literary works. Now, of course, they expanded they had now conquered the whole of Asia Minor. But of course, it was not completely over because you had Mithridates. Yeah, the Mithridates was one tough guy. Okay, Mithridates was one tough guy. This is really, he was quite something. He took a lot of poisons just to build up natural immunity. He was completely insane. Okay, now we have, of course, already Caesar. We already arrived at Caesar, and now the conquest of Gaul begins. Now, Julius Caesar's famous conquest of Gaul, right? This is insane to watch. This is how he conquered, and he even ventured forth into Britain. Caesar even went into Britain, but then he retreated. It was maybe a bit too insane. He wanted too much too fast, but damn, now Gaul is conquered. And Gaul would stay part of the Roman Empire for over 500 years. So this is kind of incredible how fast Caesar conquered this very large territory. Now we're nearing 44 BC. No, Caesar is gone. Caesar is gone. The Ides of March have happened. Caesar is gone. Now, of course, the triumvirates, right? The famous triumvirates happen, and this is, of course, the second triumvirate, of course. And again, civil war, unstable. The Roman Empire, as soon as it became a bit too large, it became very difficult to govern, and you had more and more rivals. It's the human nature. That's human nature, right? It's logical if you think about it. But Octavianus now defeats Mark Antony, and he becomes the first emperor, princeps, the first among equals. Now 27 BC, empire. The empire begins. Augustus, now call himself Augustus, now has established the Roman Empire, which would last over 1,400 years, almost, probably I would say 1,500 years if you count the last Eastern Roman rump states who fell in 1478 or something after the fall of Constantinople. This is a 1,500 year lasting empire. Think about it, 1,500 years of empire. That's insane. To think about these time spans, the USA is 250 years old. And this empire lasted 1,500 years. These are incredible time spans. Oh, now the conquest of Germania. Germania. Look at this. Look at this. It looked so good. It looked crazy good how Germania was slowly conquered. You know, if Varus only would have been such, I don't know, had such bad sense of people, like not a good people knowing person, you know, he didn't like, he didn't foresee this treachery. Like, seriously? It's like, come on, Varus, what's going on, man? What's going on? Imagine if Varus, like, I have to pause this, okay? I have to pause this now. Oh, look at this. We have to pause this for a second and just like enjoy the sight of a fully conquered, like, just enjoy the sight of a fully conquered Germania Magna. Look at this. Look at this. Just imagine what would have happened if Varus wouldn't have been such a, you know, I don't want to say anything too unfriendly about him. Maybe this could have happened to any one of us to be fooled like that. But if Varus would have been a better connoisseur of people, you know, and he would have said like, this Arminius guy, there's something strange about him. I don't trust him. Okay? Imagine Varus would have done that. He would have felt that Arminius cannot be trusted, okay? The whole of history would have gone differently. Arminius' treachery would have not happened. The Battle of Teutoburg Forest in 9 AD wouldn't have happened. And Germania probably would have been incorporated for a long time into the Roman Empire. And hence, the whole later history would have been quite different. Because then, when the large migrations began in the 5th century, you know, imagine having Germania as a bulwark. Imagine having Germania Magna as a buffer zone, where you can retreat back behind the Rhine, but you have this buffer zone that has already been Romanized, and, you know, which you can use to slow down the advance of the Germanics, where you can station a lot of troops. So, you know, I think in this alternate timeline, it might have been possible to maybe not have the Germanics breach the Rhine frontier. That's just my thinking. Of course, we don't know what would have happened. It could have still gone badly. But I think having a buffer zone in Germania would have come in quite handy in the 5th century and even the 4th century against the Germanic invaders. That would have come in quite handy, okay? I don't even want to press the play button, because now this all goes to hell. This all goes to hell now with the treachery of Arminius, of Hermann the German. Look at this. Look at this. No. It has happened. Now, of course, Germanicus comes, right? The retaliation of Germanicus, retrieving the lost eagles of the legions that had been wiped out, or some of the lost eagles that had been wiped out at the Battle of Teutoburg Forest. And he even manages to defeat all the Germanic coalitions, but Tiberius says, you know, we don't want Germania. We don't need Germania. That's Tiberius could still have established a province of Germania with Germanicus's help. But we will never know his rationale why he didn't do it. Probably because he didn't want to have Germanicus develop too much power. You know, there was always this back and forth between the Roman general and the emperor. So maybe he feared Germanicus becoming too powerful. Maybe he thought Germania isn't worth it. So, you know, we will never know why. But it's interesting that Germanicus could still have reconquered Germania. So Emperor Tiberius, you know, what can we say about him? Already over, and Caligula is now here, who of course was certainly not the best emperor, okay? He was a really bad emperor. Even though sure, the sources are biased against him, but even though we can, like, quite certainly he was not a good emperor. Claudius, on the other hand, was a quite good emperor. Okay, Claudius was quite good, but of course there's one thing he did which, of course, we apply hindsight, he couldn't have known that, but he thought it would be a good idea to conquer Britain. He thought it would be a good idea to conquer Britannia. And it might have seemed like a good idea at the time, right? But of course, in hindsight, we know that Britannia would spawn a lot of usurpers. A lot of usurpers. So, oh yeah, now Nero. Nero is also interesting because he certainly wasn't a good emperor, but he certainly wasn't also the most awful, terrible emperor, because a lot of the sources, we should not forget that a lot of the sources that wrote about Nero at the time were senators, and Nero didn't like senators. There was an animosity, so they were super biased against Nero. So this is, of course, like, we cannot 100% trust the sources. He probably was not as insane as the sources made him out to be, but he also wasn't, let's be real here, he also wasn't a good emperor. So he was certainly not a good emperor, but not as insanely bad as many make him out to be, probably. Now, of course, the civil wars after Nero, that like many emperors come and go, and Zack, Vespasian is here, and Vespasian was, in my opinion, a very good emperor. Okay, Vespasian was a solid emperor, very solid, very good economy under Vespasian, and he was very smart in how to generate money. He introduced even the latrine tax. Like, think about this, a latrine tax, the idea alone. And he established the Flavian dynasty, and he built the Colosseum, which is now finished under Titus, the Amphitheatrum Flavium. He had started it, and now it's finished, and now you have the huge games in Rome. Domitian is now emperor. Domitian is another example of an emperor that, you know, is portrayed very badly many times. Like, he was a complete crazy guy. But in my opinion, we cannot again trust the sources so much. And I think there's a lot of bias, senatorial bias against him, because he again was certainly not a fan of the Senate, and he was more autocratic, which the Senate of course didn't like, and therefore of course painted him in a very negative light. And we can only judge Roman emperors, don't forget, by the sources that we have. Imagine, for example, you would have to judge Donald Trump based on sources in 1,000 years, and the only source you have is CNN. Or you have to judge Joe Biden based on sources by Fox News, the only surviving ones. I mean, come on. That's similar to what had happened in the Roman Empire. Like, we don't know how it really was. We can just interpret. Now, of course, Trajan. Trajan is a phenomenon. Trajan is like a flawless emperor. I cannot think of a bad thing about Trajan. He was the perfect Roman emperor. The perfect Roman emperor in any way. He had a great character. He was even friendly to poor people. He had introduced the alimentia. He conquered insane regions. Everybody loved him. It cannot get better than Trajan. Like 117 now. Let's pause for a moment. 117. Okay. 117. Let's pause for a moment and just enjoy the view of this. This is like the greatest extent of the Roman Empire. 117, and then Trajan unfortunately dies. And this is like the only bad thing I can say about Trajan is like, Trajan, why did you die so early? Trajan should have lived another 10 to 15 years. Imagine if Trajan would have lived another 10 to 15 years. Mesopotamia the Romans might have been able to hold on to Mesopotamia. They might have been able to establish a Mesopotamian province. And imagine, I mean, sure, it would have been difficult, right? That's clear. I'm not denying this. But imagine you have defeated the Parthian Empire, and the Persians will never again be that constant, brutal enemy, this constant powerful enemy in the east harassing the Roman Empire from the east. Imagine you have just gotten rid of that threat. The whole of Roman history would look different. The whole of Roman history. You know, if you would have this powerful enemy in the east, you could have dealt much better with the Germanic tribes from the north. And then, therefore, of course, the Roman Empire would have been far more powerful later on. And I don't think that the Germanics would have ever become such an insane problem in that alternate timeline where Trajan had probably lived 10 or 15 more years. That's just my rationale. That's just my thinking. I might be, of course, wrong on this one, but yeah, it didn't happen. Trajan unfortunately died, and now Hadrian has taken over. And here, of course, he is completely different, okay? He is completely different from Trajan. He's consolidating his power. He's traveling around the empire very, very often. He's like, in all his provinces, you know, seeing what the soldiers are doing, micromanaging everything. Certainly not a bad emperor, but I have to say, out of the 5 good emperors, one of my least favorite ones, because also his character, you know, it's quite telling that Marcus Aurelius in his Meditations didn't mention Hadrian. Like, he thanked especially Antoninus Pius, but he left out Hadrian. And Hadrian was quite the character, like outbursts, rage, like he was quite angry at times. Let's put it like this. So I'm mixed about Hadrian. Certainly one of my lesser favorite emperors of the 5 good emperors, but certainly still quite capable emperor. That here, Antoninus Pius is actually one of my favorite Roman emperors. I mean, he is actually kind of a very underrated emperor because he didn't attack much. He didn't conquer much, right? Although I have to say that many forget that he did conquer the north of Britain, or like establish the Antonine Wall and order an offensive military expedition into the north of Britain. So it wasn't that he was completely chilling, but he was kind of like, he was a stoic, he was a philosopher, and this, of course, greatly influenced Marcus Aurelius, who then later became emperor. And Marcus Aurelius, of course, he idolizes Antoninus Pius because Antoninus, for him, was the ideal ruler, and he wanted to become like his foster father, Antoninus Pius. That's why, for me, Antoninus Pius, if I would have to choose an era in which I wanted to live within the Roman Empire, I think I would choose the reign of Antoninus Pius, Antoninus Pius. Okay, that's the era I would choose, because I think if you would want a peaceful life, if you would want everything to be pretty nice as it can get in the Roman Empire, please don't forget that we sometimes view it through like romanticized glasses, because the Roman Empire was never really a wonderful, awesome place where everything was always nice, but it certainly was the, I would say, most stable and peaceful period within the Roman Empire. And if I would choose, I would live in that era under Antoninus Pius. Of course, unfortunately, it wouldn't stay that way. We all know what's going to happen now. We all know what's going to happen. This is the peak of the Roman Empire culturally, I would say, in the sense of like art. If you look at the statues, the busts of the Roman emperors, they have the most detail. They have like incredible, elaborate detail. The technology is by far the most impressive in that time. The buildings that are built at Rome and throughout the empire, the aqueducts, everything is like by far the most sophisticated in that time now, here in that time. And now, what happens, of course? The Antonine Plague happens. The Antonine Plague. And it cannot be overstated what a huge freaking disaster the Antonine Plague was. Millions are killed. Millions of Romans die. 10% of the population. And look, immediately now, of course, the problems start. Imagine, 10% of the Roman population dies. Of course, immediately you have barbarian invasions. Immediately the Marcomanni and Quadi come from the north. invading, sacking cities for the first time ever. Marcus Aurelius has to fight his whole life. The poor guy, he just wanted to be a chill philosopher, and he has to fight against the Marcomanni, against the Quadi. Brutal, just brutal. And he actually defeats them, and he would almost establish the province of Marcomannia. Now in the last round of the Marcomannic Wars, you see here, he almost establishes the province of Marcomannia. And what happens then? He dies in 180. And then his idiot son Commodus lets everything go to waste. And Commodus is one of the... I think Commodus is very, very high up on the list of worst Roman emperors ever. He's certainly in the top 10 worst. Top 10, top 15 worst, 100%. There's not a good quality about this guy. There's not a good quality about this guy. I mean, seriously, he inherits a perfect empire, like a very good empire from his father, and now chaos. Thanks to Commodus. Chaos, civil war. Now you have the civil wars. The Praetorians go on the rampage. At one point, even the position of emperor is being held up for auction, And now, of course, the respect for the position of emperor has deteriorated. It's gone. Like, that's why now so many emperors have been killed afterwards by the Praetorians, because the respect that had been established under the Antonines and the Antonine dynasty, Marcus Aurelius, Antoninus Pius, is gone now. And here now, of course, Septimius Severus and his two sons, Caracalla and Geta. And of course, as soon as good old Septimius is gone, Caracalla and Geta will not reign for long together, because Caracalla doesn't like Geta, and Geta is gone. Damnatio Memoria is carried out. Geta is erased from all the inscriptions, from all the pictures. And Caracalla is actually, one thing he did was very good. He gave the Roman citizenship to all people within the Roman Empire, something which actually wasn't a bad idea, to be honest. Wasn't a bad idea. Elagabalus, oh man, this guy, oh shit. I mean, I don't know what this guy was thinking, what he was trying to do. He went too far. He tried his like weird Oriental cult thing in Rome, really bad, not good. Severus Alexander was actually not a bad emperor. He wasn't a bad emperor. The problem was he was quite young, and the troops, like, he didn't have the experience, the military experience, and then of course he didn't have the enough authority, I would say, over his troops, right? He misjudged some certain situations. He didn't have enough authority. And that's, of course, then massive problems start. And that is why he misjudged another situation. And a guy called Maximus Thrax, bam, gets rid of Severus Alexander. And now the crisis of the 3rd century starts. Maximus Thrax, only good thing he did was the punitive expedition into Germania at the Battle of Harzhorn. He went deep into Germania, led an insane punitive expedition. Crazy guy. And that was basically the only good thing he did. Now, of course, many emperors come and go. We are now in the middle of the crisis of the 3rd century. Philip the Arab, actually a pretty good emperor. Really not a bad emperor. Under his rule, there was the 1,000 years, the 1,000-year celebrations in Rome. Rome was now 1,000 years old already. Decius, really a bad emperor, really bad. Like, he lost his life, he lost against the Goths and died. Like, he didn't do much more. And yeah, he persecuted Christians. That's another thing he did, which is also, of course, super bad. Gallienus, my boy, Gallienus was a good, really good emperor, okay? Please, nothing against my boy Gallienus. He was a good emperor, okay? Gallienus, reigning for such a long time in the crisis of the 3rd century, tells you that he must have done something right. Now, of course, the empire is disintegrating, but he's fighting on all sides. He's winning major victories against the Germanic tribes. Why? Because he puts a lot of emphasis on the cavalry. The cavalry, okay? He understands that cavalry is important. He understands that cavalry needs more emphasis. And that is, of course, why afterwards that we see that reflected in the later Roman legions. Now, of course, the boy himself, Aurelian. This guy is just too good to be true. Like, Aurelian is like a guy from a science, like from a fantasy novel. Okay, he's a guy who shouldn't actually exist. Look, he just united. He saved the Roman Empire. Insane. Aurelian shouldn't actually exist. This guy is like a guy from a novel. Probus, also a very good emperor. Seriously, a very solid emperor. Won very important victories against Germanic tribes. Completely defeated the Alemanni, the Jutungi, the Franks, many different tribes. Crazy good emperor. But of course, unfortunately also died, also was killed. And now, of course, we are already at Diocletian, and now the Tetrarchy begins. And Diocletian, now he, of course, kind of reforms the Roman Empire, which was a very smart thing to do, because this basically ended this constant civil wars. Diocletian ended these constant damn civil wars that had plagued the Roman Empire for the entire duration of the crisis of the 3rd century. We're talking 60, 70 years here of constant civil war. And now Diocletian, with his Tetrarchy, gave the Roman Empire the possibility to not fight against each other for a while, for about 20 years, 20-25 years, which was enough time to be able to fight against the invaders, the Germanic invaders, against the Persians. And look at this, how beautifully now the empire has stabilized. And we cannot overstate Diocletian's importance enough, okay? It was Diocletian who came up with this idea, and that was very important, because that is why the 4th century is now so unusually stable. More stable in the beginning than it was in the 3rd century, you know? Now, of course, everything comes crumbling down. Oh my god, now Constantine goes completely berserk, kills Maxentius at the Battle of the Milvian Bridge, but he's, of course, still not satisfied. And, of course, now there's this semi-peace with Licinius, but it will not last long. And, of course, then he will soon attack Licinius as well. And that, of course, is when things start really going south, in my opinion. Because the thing is, you know, how did he defeat Licinius? One thing he did was to withdraw the 2 Praetorian fleets, okay? The 2 Praetorian fleets from Italy, Battle of Hellespont, Crispus winning against Licinius. Crispus killed by Constantine. Constantine like, oh Crispus, thanks son for winning at the Battle of Hellespont. I will reward you now with death. Very good. Very friendly father. Very friendly guy, Constantine. Very friendly. And he withdraws basically the 2 Praetorian fleets of Italy. Not many people talk about this, but he withdraws the 2 Praetorian fleets, lets Crispus fight against Licinius at the Battle of Hellespont, and afterwards the Western Roman Empire found itself without fleets, without a strong navy. And this, friends, is the reason why later the Western Romans had such trouble in defending, you know, the coastlines of the West. Afterwards, for example, when the Vandals, you know, when the Vandals took over Africa, the Romans just didn't have a fleet. If they would have had a fleet, it would have gone quite differently, I would say. And also, imagine, now Constantine creates Constantinople. I love Constantinople as much as any other guy, but think about the loss of prestige, the damage this did to the old Roman heartland. Also the economic damage, you know, it reduced the economic power of Italy. It reduced the prestige. For God's sake, he even plundered Rome, you know, Rome itself, and brought many artworks to his new city of Constantinople. So the West was severely weakened and the East was made stronger. So it was a shift from West to East, you know. And that's why I don't really know what to think about Constantine. Some things he did were pretty impressive, no doubt about it. But I still cannot shake the feeling that the rise of the East, as I like to say, was built upon the demise of the West. So that is my 2 cents on Constantine. I'm very mixed about him. Like, certainly a few things he did were very great. He won major victories against many Germanics, defeated the Franks, even reconquered the province of Dacia. Look here, reconquering parts of Dacia. Even wanted to mount an expedition against Persia before he died. So certainly quite some impressive achievements. However, some things, I cannot shake it that it wasn't good for the Western Roman Empire. It was really good for the East, but not so much for the Western. Now, of course, what happens? His dynasty, his sons, very unstable situation, because his sons, they don't like each other so much. So what do as always? They fight against each other, right? They fight against each other. So now there's a bit of a semblance of stability with Constans and Constantius II, but of course now we know Constans will not make it too long, okay? Constans will not survive this. And then Constantius II will be the only survivor of the sons of Constantine. And now, of course, very soon, our boy Julian enters the scene. Our boy Julian now enters the scene. Man, this is insane. Now it's beginning. Constantius II and Julian. And look, Julian basically saved the Western Roman Empire. Like, there were huge barbarian invasions. Huge invasions. Julian defeats them. Out of nothing. Like, he didn't have any military experience. But then, of course, Constantius II dies. Julian becomes sole emperor. And what does he do? Julian, why did you do this? Why didn't you consolidate? Why? Like, he immediately goes on completely restless. If he would have consolidated, if he would have been more methodical. But, no, let's just immediately attack Persia. Immediately. Bam! And he freaking dies. Really not good. Julian, why? Anyways, now Valentinian I and Valens. No, Valentinian I was a really good emperor. Valentinian I was a solid emperor. The last time I would even say that the Roman Empire was really, really powerful, actually more powerful than the East. That was under Valentinian I. And Valens was also not so bad. So both were pretty good Roman emperors, very tolerant, religiously tolerant. But then, of course, the thing is, Valens, we will always only remember him as the guy who lost at Adrianople. And now now we're getting there. Now we're getting there, and bam, now it's happening. Soon it's happening, and bam, it happened. Valens gets killed at Adrianople, and then that is, of course, when everything spirals out of control. That is, of course, when everything like a negative feedback loop starts. Okay, it's like everything like gets downhill from bad to worse to even worse. It's like a bad chain reaction has gotten into motion. That is what the Battle of Adrianople actually is, and they never managed to get rid of the Goths again. Look at this. The Goths now are firmly within the Roman Empire, firmly in there. Look at this. They cannot get rid of the Goths. No, they even gave them the lands here. Like you are allowed to settle here. Okay, they even allowed them to settle. So this is really a bad situation. Now you have made a precedent allowing a foreign tribe to basically have their own quasi-independent state within your territory. Think about this. Think about what the other Germanic people were thinking then, when the Romans allowed the Goths to settle within the Roman Empire and basically have their own quasi-independent state. Think about what the other Germanics were thinking. Like, hey, if the Goths can do that, maybe we can as well. And now, of course, oh god, now the civil wars. The civil wars again. Magnus Maximus, the usurper from Britannia. Then, of course, the East fighting against the West. What happens? The West loses by chance. Theodosius was a good commander, a good military commander. And, of course, the West somehow always loses. And what happens then? The legions the Western legions get decimated, and the West really would have needed soldiers in what was to come 20 years down the line. But of course, these civil wars, Theodosius against Maximus and later against Eugenius and Arbogast, is what severely weakened the Western Roman Empire, so that now suddenly a large portion of their army had been decimated. And that's why later Stilicho needs to withdraw troops from the Rhine frontier down, to Italy for the defense of Italy. Then the Rhine frontier is severely weakened, and that's why the Germanics could in 406 AD breach the Rhine River frontier and pour into Gallia, pour into Hispania. So you see that chain reaction, how everything leads to the next bad step, and this leads to another bad thing and to another bad thing, and this is like this bad chain reaction. And the civil wars now between Theodosius and Magnus Maximus and Eugenius and Arbogast are the reason why the Western Roman Empire got so severely weakened, okay? First, they got their Praetorian fleet stolen, then they always get thrashed by the East, and now here we have, of course, very soon now Valentinian II dies, and we have the Battle of Frigidus River, then Theodosius I immediately dies, and what happens now, of course, Theodosius dies, and his two idiot sons, Honorius and Arcadius, are being left on the throne. Thank you very much. Thank you so much, Theodosius. Thank you so much for leaving us your incompetent sons. Now, bam, here, Battle of Pollentia, our boy Stilicho defeating Alaric. Alaric has no chance as long as Stilicho is alive. Stilicho, the great defender, here at Battle of Verona again. Stilicho, the great defender, Alaric retreating back to Illyricum. And as long as Stilicho is alive, Alaric has no chance. Now, a second time, Radagaisus, with a huge Germanic coalition, tries to penetrate into Italy again. And Stilicho defeats him again. So Stilicho saved Italy at least 3 times, possibly. I think Radagaisus invaded twice. I think Alaric invaded twice. So Stilicho saves Italy 4 times from massive Germanic invaders. And what does Honorius do as a reward? What does Honorius now do as a reward? What does the idiot Honorius do? Reward him with exceptional medals and stuff? No! Freaking kills him, okay? Now Stilicho is dead. 408. Okay? 408, Stilicho dead. And now everything falls to pieces. And, Stilicho, if Stilicho would have been left alive, I think he might have managed to make Alaric foederati. That was his plan, okay? That was Stilicho's plan. He knew Alaric is a very powerful guy. He wanted Alaric and his Visigoths as foederati. And together with Alaric and his foederati, I think they would have reconquered Hispania and Gallia and completely defeated the Germanic invaders. Completely defeated them or ousted them. One of those two things, okay? History would have gone very differently, and the West probably might have been saved if Stilicho would have been left alive, because Stilicho was an extremely competent guy, extremely competent military commander, and with the help of Alaric, the sack of Rome then would not have happened, of course, and with Alaric, I think that was Stilicho's plan all along. But no, of course, no, Stilicho was killed, and now look at this, how everything falls apart. Yeah, sack of Rome, of course, really bad, but not, of course, what was really bad. I mean, psychologically, it was really bad, but it didn't play such a huge role in the grand scheme of things, the sack of Rome itself in 410. Now, of course, one thing which Honorius at least did, he let Constantius III do all the work, okay? At least he didn't mess this up, Honorius. Very good. At least something that he did right. He let Constantius III live, and look at this, Constantius III was actually able to kind of stabilize everything, So you had okay, semi-independent states, but it was okay, foederati, and if it would have stayed like that, it might have been possible to salvage the situation, and a few generations later, the Germanics would have been assimilated into the Roman Empire. But of course, the problem is that this did not happen, because what happened afterwards? What happened afterwards? Let's just wait and see what happens now. Of course, now we have a short interregnum, because now Ioannis becomes emperor in the West, but he isn't allowed to stay emperor, and bam, he's defeated. And who is put onto the throne? Who is put onto the throne instead of the actually quite capable Ioannis, who would have probably been a good emperor? He was quite a good emperor, to be honest, in his short reign, religiously very tolerant. But he's being replaced with whom? Valentinian III. Valentinian III. Do I need to even describe Valentinian III? Do I even need to describe him? He was like, if we say that Honorius was bad, Valentinian III was at least as bad. Okay, at least as bad. And he reigns for such a hilariously, stupidly long time. Honorius and Valentinian III, they reign combined, think about this, for an insane 60 years. 60. They reign for a combined 60 freaking years. Almost a human lifetime. And that's when the Roman Empire dissolves. And look what immediately happens under Valentinian III. The Vandals cross into Africa. Now, of course, this wasn't entirely Valentinian III's fault, okay? This was like the civil war between Flavius Aetius, Flavius Felix, and Bonifacius, okay? It was a civil war back and forth between the great generals of the Western Roman Empire. It was a power struggle, and that is, of course, very unfortunate. But the thing is, this only happened why? Because the emperor was so weak. The emperor was, he was very young still at the time, and Galla Placidia was reigning, but the situation was therefore so bad because there was no strong emperor. And then, of course, the generals, there was a power vacuum, and so what's happening? The generals fight for power. Aetius, Felix, and Bonifacius. And that's why the Vandals could set over into Africa. That's why they were allowed to conquer Africa, you know. And when Africa was conquered, the difficulty level suddenly went from, I would say, medium hard, you know, it was already hard to fully restore the West, but it could have still survived, you know, like, I would say medium difficulty level to nightmare mode. Like, it jumped instantly from medium to Dark Souls level, okay? It's like, pew, pew, difficulty jump, insane difficulty jump, because now, the tax revenue from Africa, the Western Roman Empire didn't have these amazing provinces like the East, okay? Look, the East had rich provinces that were very safe from invasions, okay? You cannot really come through the Caucasus here. It's like you have to come through the whole, through Thrace, and you're basically like Egypt and Levant is safe, okay? Egypt and Levant is safe. However, the West only had Africa as the richest, like Africa was by far the richest province. And as soon as that one was gone, the tax revenue fell probably, I don't want to say anything wrong, but I just have a feeling that the tax revenue of Africa was at least a third. I think at least a third of the tax revenue of the Western Roman Empire. At least a third. Lower bound. So now imagine what happens when suddenly 1/3 or more of your tax revenue is gone. Like, what does that do to the budget, to the you know, treasury of your empire? It's not looking good. You suddenly cannot pay your army anymore. You suddenly don't have even enough to upkeep your army. So you have to disband legions, because those comitatenses, they don't come cheap. So what do? You have to disband the legions, and you replace them with super cheap foederati. Sure, this might sound like a good idea at first, but they don't have the experience. They don't have the you know, they are not as high quality. and they don't have the loyalty. They don't have the loyalty to the Roman Empire, you know? They are not like comitatenses. So of course, that is why suddenly everything goes super downhill after 429 when the Vandals set over into Africa. That was the real blow to the Roman Empire, okay? Losing Africa. And of course, they tried to reconquer Africa. I think the first try came already in the late 430s, if I'm not mistaken. But it failed. It failed, okay? And then another try came in 441. Why? The thing is, the king, Gaiseric, the king of the Vandals, he was a freaking smart guy, okay? In 441, there was an effort by the West and the East to reconquer Africa. But Gaiseric, this cunning, this evil genius, okay? Evil genius, he immediately sent out envoys to Attila the Hun, okay, the king of the Huns, and telling him, hey, Attila, the Eastern Romans are mounting a huge expedition to reconquer Africa, to attack me. You can attack their hinterland. There won't be any soldiers, okay? You have nothing to fear. And then, of course, Attila immediately attacked, and the Eastern Romans had to withdraw, and the whole expedition was aborted. You know, that's how it went down. Really unfortunate. Really unfortunate. Now Aetius manages to somehow stabilize the situation, but the problem is Africa. The moment Africa is gone, like you don't have the revenue anymore. You don't have the revenue. Even with everything that Aetius did, and see how bad this is. Like the invasion of the Huns after the Romans retreated. I mean, this is a really bad situation. Now the Suevi managed to expand as well. Crazy. Now even Attila comes forth and like Battle of the Catalonian Plains, and in the last ditch effort, Aetius manages even to drive him back. Then he invades Italy now in 452, and Marcian, the Eastern Roman Emperor, luckily attacks the hinterland, the Hunnic hinterland, luckily. And that allows, that basically is the reason probably why Attila then retreated and why Italy was saved, because of the attack of Marcian, the Eastern Roman Emperor. Now Attila is dead, so the Huns are gone now. But of course now Valentinian III in his utter stupidity kills Aetius, kills the Magister Militum Aetius, and now utter chaos. Marcellinus of Dalmatia splits off from the Roman Empire. This is not, as far as I know, not entirely accurate, because this should split off here. Dalmatia split off from the Roman Empire under Marcellinus. So everything was falling apart because of Valentinian III, the idiot. Because he killed Aetius. And now, of course, we have this rapid succession of emperors. And bam! Now, of course, Majorian enters the scene. Okay? A new player enters the game. And our boy Majorian, is, of course, quite heroic. That's why I named the channel after him, right? And look at this. Look what he's doing. He's amassing a Foederati army, 30,000 strong. Bam! He defeats the Burgundians. And bam! He defeats the Visigoths. And bam! He defeats the Suevi. In 3 short years, he defeats the Burgundians, the Visigoths, and the Suevi. And look at how the Roman Empire looks again. I'm not even sure. I think even this part here of northern Hispania was also firmly under Roman control. So I'm not sure why Tominus has it here like under semi-Roman control. But as far as I know, it was also under Roman control. So just look at this, how suddenly it looks a lot better. And just imagine now if Majorian would have reconquered Africa. Man, this would have been amazing. Then of course, they could have won. Now, of course, with the killing of Majorian, Aegidius splits off from the empire. Actually, Marcellinus here also should split off from the empire, and everything goes down even faster. Oh man, it looks really, really bad now. Look at this. After Majorian's gains are immediately undone, because now, of course, who is, of course, now in power? Ricimer. Okay? Ricimer has managed, of course, a few years before already to gain power in Italy. And as soon as Ricimer was in Italy and had the control in Italy, it was super difficult because now suddenly you don't have only enemies on the exterior, okay? But now you have also an enemy on the interior. So you are surrounded by enemies. Ricimer is basically a Germanic invader who somehow managed to come to power and basically is kind of like a Germanic intruder who has hijacked the Roman Empire, if you will. Really, really bad situation. Really bad. And now in 467, a good emperor is sent by the east, by Leo I. Leo I, also by the way, an amazing emperor. And he sends Anthemius. And this is actually the last chance now to really save the Western Roman Empire, okay? This is really the last chance now. We are talking about the last chance because now Anthemius mounts an expedition to reconquer Africa. In 467, they have to return because of bad weather. Then the next try in 468, and bam, Battle of Cape Bon. Battle of Cape Bon. And look, Heraclius, one of the commanders of this expedition, actually managed to reconquer Tripolitania. Marcellinus had managed to reconquer Sicily and Sardinia, so even then it wouldn't have been over. But of course, the idiot Basiliscus. It's just so bad. It just hurts. These last 20, 30 years, they hurt so much. So many mistakes made. It's crazy. Basiliscus gives Gaiseric 3 days to prepare his surrender. And of course, this was just a trick by Gaiseric to buy time. And Gaiseric secretly prepares a sheep. Would also be funny if he would prepare sheep. But no, I mean ships, a fleet of ships. And he sends out the ships, fire ships, okay? Like burning fire ships. When the wind turns, the fire ships go into the Roman fleet and there's huge chaos. And then there's another surprise attack. And half of the Roman fleet of 1,100 ships is being destroyed. And the crazy thing is, even then it wouldn't have been completely over because Heraclius, as we said, was still making good progress on land. Marcellinus could still have attacked with the remainder of the Eastern Roman fleet. But what happens? Marcellinus is being killed in Sicily. And with the death of Marcellinus, then it really falls apart. And some say that Ricimer was behind the assassination of Marcellinus. And I could imagine this to be true because, Ricimer, he killed quite a few capable people. And it appears almost that he was really trying his best to destroy the Roman Empire as fast as he could, okay? As fast as he could. And that was the last chance because now, with the defeat at Cape Bon, the Eastern Roman Empire is bankrupt and cannot help the West anymore. That is the reason why now the state finances of the East are so bad because they lost more than half the fleet. That is the reason why they now cannot help the West so much anymore in the following years, okay? So this is a really bad thing that happened, the Battle of Cape Bon, due to the idiocy of Basiliscus. And this was really the last chance, in my opinion, to save the Western Roman Empire. This was really the last chance. Because if they would have saved Africa, it still might have survived the West. It still might have survived. Because suddenly the state finances would have doubled. Like if you suddenly have the revenue from Africa again, bam, your state finances probably have doubled. Your treasury has more than doubled. And suddenly you can raise armies again, right? You can maybe even raise high quality comitatenses units, not only the cheap foederati, but we are talking high quality comitatenses again, right? But after this failed, I don't know, it looked really, really bad now, really bad. And now in 472, this giant a-hole Ricimer even kills Anthemius, okay? Kills Anthemius, sacks Rome. Okay, Ricimer. I don't know how people can defend Ricimer. If anyone defends Ricimer, I don't know, man, what's wrong with you. This guy sacked Rome, and thousands upon thousands of Romans died. Innocent Romans were killed by Ricimer. Like, who would do such a thing? And Ricimer is, you cannot compare Ricimer to Aetius or to Stilicho, okay? They were of a different caliber, especially Stilicho. Like, please never compare Ricimer and Stilicho. Stilicho is here, okay? Stilicho is here, and Ricimer is somewhere down there. Like, they are not even on the same planet. Like, Stilicho and Ricimer are not even on the same planet, okay? Ricimer freaking killed tens of thousands of Romans for his own personal greed, for his own power hungriness. And Stilicho never did something like this. Never. He was loyal until the end. In fact, Stilicho let himself be killed knowingly, just for the reason to avoid a civil war in Italy. That's Stilicho. Ricimer goes as far as to sack Rome in 472, tens of thousands of Romans being killed in the process, the city being like... Rome was, of course, by that time already in very bad shape, but afterwards probably in even worse shape, okay? Ricimer, the bane. Ricimer, another bane of the Romans. If I would have to list the banes of the Romans, Gaiseric and Ricimer. Both very high up there, okay? The bane of the Romans. Sack of Rome. Yeah, now, like emperor after emperor, puppet emperors, Glycerius, Olybrius, all those emperors come and go. Now, the last act of the Eastern Roman Emperor, Leo I, sending Julius Nepos, the last try to restore the Western Roman Empire, the last try to oust the Germanics, and indeed, Gundobad fled back to the Burgundians, so it looked not completely bad. However, then, of course, the rebellion of Orestes, the idiot. Orestes rebelling against Nepos, Nepos fleeing to Dalmatia, and the rest is history. And then, of course, like, Orestes immediately loses to Urwaca and his foederati. You know? Like, Orestes, what the hell was going on, man? Orestes, what the hell was wrong with you, huh? Like, what kind of idiot were you? I don't know what you were thinking. And Nepos, I don't know, Nepos should not have replaced Ecdicius, who was the previous Magister Militum, with Orestes. That was a big mistake by Julius Nepos. And now, of course, yeah, it's over. Like, over. Over in quotation marks, because we know that actually in 476, the classical Roman way of life didn't end in Italy, and the infrastructure and the cities were mostly intact, and there were still... Latin was still spoken, and nominally it was part of the Eastern Roman Empire now, right? So Odoacer didn't actually change anything in Italy. And even later, Theodoric also didn't change anything in Italy. So Italy, probably in the year 510, 520, would have been very similar if you would be a time traveler, and you go back to the year 450, 460, it would look almost the same as in 510 or 520. It was still very much the same. It was still very much intact. What, of course, then later really caused the fall of Rome, if you want to call it like that, was the Gothic Wars. That was like the complete destruction of Italy. This here is dated as the classical fall of Rome, 476 AD date. And this comes, of course, from later Eastern Roman writers, such as Marcellinus Comes, who basically used that as a bit of a propaganda measure, you know, to say like, oh, the barbarians, they took over the West, so now we have to free the West from the tyranny of the barbarians, using it as a kind of a propaganda measure in order to justify Justinian's war of reconquest against the West. So Rome didn't really fall in 476. In the city of Rome, nothing really happened. Actually, the much worse year for Rome was 472, when the a-hole Ricimer sacked it. Actually, in 476, probably it looked better than in 472, because by that time, probably some of the damages had been repaired. So, you know, it's not really the end of Rome, but it's the traditional end, and that's also where the video ends now. And now we have watched the first half, I would say. And in another reaction, of course, we're going to do the Eastern Roman Empire as well, because the story is not over, friends. We have still 1,000 more years, okay? We still have 1,000 more years until, of course, the last Eastern Roman rump states fell as well. But we are now finished with the first part, and I hope you enjoyed this rambling. It wasn't was it really a reaction? I don't know. I was just rambling for probably 45 minutes, 50 minutes straight. So I'm really sorry if I rambled too much, but it just comes flowing out of me, all the thoughts I have when seeing this. Great video by Tominus Maximus. Again, please go to his channel and subscribe. Really great guy. An inspiration for me for starting Maiorianus. So I really enjoyed the video, and I hope you enjoyed this commentary or rambling as well. So then, dear friends of late Roman history, see you in the next full-length video. Please consider subscribing, liking. Maybe you even want to support the channel via Patreon or via YouTube membership. I would be super thankful. I will make many more such reaction videos because, I don't know, I have fun doing them. Maybe you like them, maybe some will also we are on YouTube, some will also hate them, but I will just continue doing them from time to time. I hope you had some fun. I certainly had fun. I wish you a nice day, and then see you next time. Bye!